Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome to episode 2 of the MindCouch webinar series. Last week we had our first session, which was Stay Connected. Today it's keeping yourself motivated and productive. So I'm just going to share my screen and I'm going to take you through what it is that we've kind of introduced here and what it is that we're working on. So the MindCouch is a series for all employees, for those of you that haven't been on here before. It's for anyone to dial in. It's hosted every Tuesday at 11 a.m. and we cover a number of topics as we go through the programme. We've got the rest of May and a little bit into June, but we're hoping if everyone likes these sessions, we're going to carry these on longer term for everyone to dial in every week and just see different things about different topics, hear from different speakers. So this week we're joined by Parmi, Kerry and Simran. I'm going to hand over to them in a moment just to do an introduction to themselves. But you can see the rest that we've got for the rest of the month. So this week we're kind of building on what we started on last week when we talked about kind of emotional well-being, mental health, keeping yourself proactive. Today we're going to talk around what's motivation, how you can sort of help with your productivity. And we're hearing from people who are both still in the business and on furlough as well. So they'll talk about that in a moment. And then next week we go on to more around kind of collaboration. So how do you take that piece as you as an individual and move that into a teaming culture and keep that from afar? So we're joined by Ian and Lewis. And then after that, we're going to start looking at habits. So how can you make and break habits? So we're joined by Hannah, Hetzel and Chris to talk about that. And then the final one towards the end of the month, beginning of June, is navigating the change. And we thought that was quite apt for the time that we'll be in when we're starting to launch SuperPay as well. And like I say, we'll look to continue these topics afterwards as well. So if there's anything you'd like to see, do get in touch and let me know what you'd like to see on the agenda. Okay, so today's panelists, we're joined by Parmi Panisar, Simran Sakaria and Kerry Schumark. So I'm going to hand over to each of them now just to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do here in Payment Sense. So if I hand over to Parmi, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi guys. Hi everybody. Thanks so much for joining. So hey, I'm Parmi. I work in the marketing team as a channel marketer for field sales and for partners. I work with Hugo and Lucy. And basically my day-to-day role is to support, engage, enable both partners and field sales and really contribute to moving the needle for the business.
Brilliant, thank you, Parmi. Handing over to Sim. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Sim. I'm a product manager. So I'm currently working with the Vita unit. So we're looking at basically addressing all of the customer needs around account management for SuperPay. So anything right from I want to add receipt roles, I want to enable my SIM card, I want a new terminal, right through to leaving us. So I'm not going to call it mothership, but if you wanted a SuperPay equivalent, it's kind of creating the new mothership for SuperPay, both for CS agents and then eventually what customers can potentially do themselves from a self-serve perspective. I joined back in August 2009, kind of helping with the creation of kind of the units, and yeah, just kind of looking forward to getting SuperPay on the road and bringing more and more customers onto our new product with our new brand.
Brilliant, thanks Sim, and it's okay, you can call it mothership, it's a safe space. Kerry, finally over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, so my name's Kerry. I'm a field sales coach here at Payment Sense. So in my role, I work with the field sellers in the field, so I'm remote based as all of my team are. And I work with the sellers to work on their productivity, their sales, their LTRs, and of course in turn their earnings and try to boost that as much as we possibly can. So you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the southwest in Somerset, so I cover all of the southwest really.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kerry. Okay, so just to kind of give a bit of context to what we're talking about today and just something to think about, there's a piece that a research company did called Rescue Time, and last year, towards the end of last year, 2019, they did a study about productivity, and there were some really interesting results that I think really set the tone for today's session and what we're going to talk about. And they studied 185 million hours worth of work or workers, and they looked at kind of their productivity rates, and what they wanted to establish is how much time in a day is actually used for productive tasks. And the results are on the screen, as you can see. And they said that workers check their emails and Slacks on average every 6 minutes. This is from their study. So every 6 minutes on average, those 185 million hours they studied, people are checking it every 6 minutes, which is just insane. People are constantly checking email and Slack and perhaps not utilising the time to do what we'd class as the productive tasks. So things like moving projects, creating reports, doing their actual kind of big focus pieces of work. From that, they actually said that about a third of those people were checking it every 3 minutes. And I suppose when I read that, I was thinking back to social media and how people, I sit on it most nights and I have a flick through Facebook or Instagram, and you kind of just naturally have this instinct to just have a look. You're not doing much, but you're just having a look at it to see what's happening. And that happens with emails and Slack. And we have to be careful that actually most of our time isn't on there, and actually we are able to commit the time to the projects that we need to be working on. And they said 40% of workers never get more than 30 minutes of focus time. So of those ones they studied, 40% of them never got more than 30 minutes of focus time, which to me makes sense. In learning and development, we know that kind of short, sharp bursts of learning are easier. You keep attention span for between 20 and 40 minutes. So to me, that makes sense. But again, we need to think about how do we utilize that time, that focus time that we do have. And it's important to note this study was done when people were working in an office, not remotely. So this changes slightly. We know when you're working remotely that you have less interruptions. You've got more time to kind of put to tasks. But again, how much of your day? Is it a full 8 hours of productivity, would you say? I think no, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't. We get chunks of time that we can be fully productive. But overall, the study found that in a working day, the workers had about 2 hours, 48 minutes of productive tasks. So just under 3 hours out of an 8-hour working day. It doesn't seem much, does it? So what we have to think about is how do we keep productive? How do we keep productivity high? How do we keep ourselves motivated? And how do we use that time effectively? Even if there are distractions, that's fine. You don't, like I said, you don't have to have a full 8 hours of productivity, but how do you utilize that time of productive tasks to actually get the job done and get the stuff done that you need to do? So there's this mentality of, like I was saying, around checking email and Slacks and social media, but it's quite easy for us to always be on. Always on call, always contactable, always online. We know that with the fact that we've all been set up to work remotely with laptops, or we've got mobile phones, you have Slack, you have emails. There's always a way for people to contact you, and that can happen a lot without people realizing, but it's past 5:30 and you're getting calls. I've had calls on a Sunday before from sales guys. I've had calls at 10, 11 o'clock at night from people from work. And it's important that we kind of get that right balance where we can also switch off and compartmentalize, I suppose, our time and our work-life balance. Really, it becomes ever more important, especially when we're working remotely. We want to kind of keep that in check. And that's what we talked about last week in last week's session. The downside of always being on, you probably already know this, but it's disruptive to sleep, especially if you are working late. We know studies show that if you're on a screen, on a phone or on a computer, the actual lights can have an effect on your quality of sleep as well. So it disrupts your sleep, which leads to less productivity the next day if you're tired. It can lead to stress and depression. This blurring of the line between work-life balance and your ability to kind of switch off as well can have a real lasting impact on you as a person, and again leads to less productivity the following day or following weeks and months even. And then there's an element of procrastination as well. So When we feel overwhelmed or when we feel that we've got too much on, we actually end up procrastinating with some tasks. So we could do the things that are kind of meaningless and quick wins rather than the stuff that's a bigger project and needs more attention or time span to it. So we end up putting those things off, and we need to be really conscious of avoiding this always on mentality or this part where we get overworked or burn out as well. And hopefully today's session will give you some ideas on how to do that, and the guys will talk a bit more on this. So there's a few steps to do, and this is by no means you have to do this every single day. It's just some ideas to think about, and Parmi, Kerry and Sim are going to talk a bit more about what they do and how they do it, but just some tasks that you can do. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or you feel that you've got a lot of things to do, I quite like doing a list. I'm a to-do list person. I like to list it and then cross it off. I get a real satisfaction with that. But list all the tasks that you do have, and then work out what's important and what's not. So there's an Eisenhower decision matrix. Some of you might have seen it. It's the urgent, important matrix. But it allows you to prioritize what you've got to do, what tasks you've got to do, and then spend time on the stuff that is urgent and that is important, and the stuff that is important but maybe not urgent and you can schedule later on. So it just helps you kind of time manage and prioritize and be a bit more productive. And I'll talk through those squares in a second that are in that diagram. And then from that, time chunk your calendar as well. So schedule in time to do stuff. We saw on that research piece there that people are checking Slack and emails all day, every day. Perhaps we don't need to do that. Perhaps we can allocate time for checking emails. I quite like to do it where I have 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes after lunch, 30 minutes at the end of the day where I just clear down my emails. And that way I know that time in between I've got for actually assigning to the jobs that I need to do or the tasks that I need to get done. And it just allows you to kind of compartmentalize, like I said, and just kind of break it down into manageable chunks so it's not so overwhelming for you. So just looking at that little diagram there on the slide, it separates into 4 quadrants. So you've got not important and important down one side, and then you've got urgent and not urgent going across. So you take a list of things that you need to do, or your tasks that you've got, and you have a look and you put them into a square. So you decide which square do they actually fit into. So if it's important work, so you know that it's going to add a lot of value, it's really important that you get it done for you or for your team, you've got a deadline for doing it, and you know that it's urgent as well, so you're time bound by it, you know that it needs to be done very, very quickly, then you put it in that green box. So it's a do it now tasks. You know, it's going to add value and it's urgent to get it done. Let's get it done now. And you put that in and you do it now. And then when you time chunk your calendar, that's one of the first boxes that you go to, and you put that in now. You then have your blue box there, which is it's important and it's going to add value, but it's not urgent. So an example of this might be, for me, for example, in my role, it could be that I've got a training session in 2 weeks' time that I need to put the materials together for. So it's important because I need to deliver that training course. So I know I need to get this task done, and it's going to add value because people are going to learn a lot from it. But then it's not urgent. So I know that it's in 2 weeks, so I've got a bit of time. So perhaps I schedule in a time to do that later in the week. So that can go into my blue box, which is decide. Then you've got down in the bottom, you've got your not important tasks. So these are things that it's a nice to do, but it's not urgent. So again, I'll just give you an example of one it's not important, but it is urgent for me. So that's the red box where you can delegate it. So we have something with our sales teams where we need to accredit them to have done their anti-money laundering test with our partners. So compliance learning, basically. Super important because it blocks deals. Sorry, super urgent because it can block their deals, okay? But it's not important that I have to do it. Anyone in my team or department could do it. So it's very important that we get it done, or very urgent that we get it done, but it's not important for me to do it. So I could delegate it out and I could ask someone in the team if they could pick it up for me because I've got too many tasks on. So hopefully that makes sense. That's the delegate one. And then you've got the delete one. So if it's not important and it's not urgent, then just eliminate it. So it might be on your to-do list something like, I don't know, sort out my folders on Google Drive, for example, sort out the filing system. It's manageable. You can do it without it. So do we need to just eliminate that and do that later on when I've got less things to do? So think of it in those 4 quadrants. It's super useful. Sometimes I just get a piece of paper and scribble them down into those boxes just to help me manage my time and my productivity. So I'm actually focusing on the stuff that's important and urgent, or the stuff that's important but I can do later on in the week. And like I said, time chunk your calendar so you know your dedicated time for things. Block out a meeting if you know that you need time to concentrate, you don't need any interruptions, block it out. Turn off your notifications on Slack, close down your email page when you're in that time so that you know you're not going to be disrupted and you're not going to be distracted as well. Or another way to do it, and I've put another example on there, that might be, actually that's a bit much extreme, I don't need that, I don't have that many things to do, I just want to be more productive with my time. Another really good exercise that I've done in the past is to keep a time log for just a few days, 2-3 consecutive days. Just write down what you did and how long it took, or the times that it took to do it. And then at the end of it, just look back on those few days and say, actually, was I wasting time anywhere? Was there times when I was really unproductive and didn't need to do that? And just go through, and then from that, you kind of get this self-awareness of where you're putting your time and where you're putting your efforts into. And actually, I didn't need to keep checking my emails 10 times a day. I could have actually just done it in one chunk and then gone on to the next piece. So just a couple of ideas there on what you can do, and some of the tools that you can use for productivity as well that we already have access to is Slack, WhatsApp. Great for communicating, speak to people, ask your team, join your team Slack group, join the company Slack groups, have a look what's out there for different things. Instead of duplicating work, you might find that other people have already done it, or there could be things that people could share with you that you could use to do your work, which just makes you that bit quicker, so you don't have to go away and research, or you don't have to go away and build a slide deck that perhaps already exists, which you could use for your presentation or whatever it happens to be. So use those communication tools and speak to people. And similarly, use Google Drive as well. Great tool for productivity, because you can have shared drives. I think most teams do have a drive that they can use. You can share it across teams as well, so it doesn't just have to be in your department. Parmi gives me access to a lot of her channel marketing stuff so that I can have access for field sellers, and we can share it through training and things like that. So just think about how you can share content and information and things using Google Drive and Google Docs. You can work collaboratively on it as well, and we've got a session on that next week as well if you want to have a look at that in a bit more detail. Using Zoom, we talked last week about Zoom burnout, so only use it where necessary, but it's always nice to have that kind of face-to-face interaction as well, and to use it for kind of brainstorming or for working on team tasks together as well. It doesn't just have to be a meeting. I've done it with Kieran on my team a few times recently. We've bring up the whiteboard or bring up a shared doc, and we go through and we brainstorm what it is we're going to do and how we're going to work on it. And we kind of kill two birds with one stone, because I don't need to think of it on my own and then tell him what we're going to do or talk it through. We come up with it together just in one session as well. And people like visuals as well, so it's nice for people to be able to kind of have that visual communication and task building together. You've got tools like Trello. It's not a company one, a standard. It's a free one that we have available on the App Store on your desktop. Great for productivity, for teamwork particularly, or if you're on projects together. It allows you to build cards basically online, have a board that you can share, put all your workflows on there, and then move it across in different swim lanes or whatever you want to use it for, and mark off who's done what. You can put updates for a project on there, you can attach documents for anything that you've done on there, you can assign it to people, you can put deadlines for stuff to be done, but it allows you to see on any kind of collective project together who's doing what as well, so it just keeps that information flowing and that communication going. And then I've put Office Vibe on there. I think it's really important that you're having good conversations with your line managers about the work that you're doing and how you're doing it, and think about giving feedback. And it's not always easy to go and say to your manager, actually, I'm being as productive as I can, but the workload's too much. So if you're struggling, use Office Vibe. It's anonymous. It goes to your manager. They're able to see the feedback. They can't see it's from you, but at least they get a feeling for how people are feeling about the workload. Particularly now when teams are a lot more reduced and they're working very lean at the moment, it's probably a good opportunity to kind of bring up the things that you want, or perhaps you don't have the tools that you need to be productive as well. So if you need anything there, again, I'd advise to speak to your line manager, or if not, put it onto Office Vibe if you feel more comfortable, and put what you think would help you be more productive in your role. So that's the kind of productivity piece. The final bit before we move into the panel discussion that I want to talk about is motivation. So it's all very well being productive, but you need to be motivated. There needs to be something, a reason for you to do this. And it's important that we kind of, like I said, have this self-awareness about us and what we're capable of, and what we can do and how we can contribute to it. And we need to think about what motivates us. So just a brief intro to motivators, and something that there's some resources at the end of this session which I'll show you if you want to have a look at this in more depth. But thinking about what motivates you to do your work, or to do what you need to do. It doesn't have to be work, this could be a personal thing as well. But it falls into two categories. So you have your extrinsic motivators and your intrinsic motivators. So if it's extrinsic, you're motivated by external rewards. So it's things like being promoted, or pay rises, or bonuses, or benefits, or it could be winning a prize or a competition, or getting a badge or a certificate. They're extrinsic motivators because you get an external reward for the job or the work or the hobby that you're doing. If it's an intrinsic motivator, you're motivated for your own sake and personal rewards. Now, people always have some from both. So there'll always be extrinsic motivators for people and intrinsic motivators. And I think it's important, particularly with the intrinsic motivators, that you become aware of what your triggers are, what motivates you to do the stuff that you do, so you can purpose your time into the right efforts and the right things. So intrinsic motivators are about your own sake and your own personal rewards. So what do you get from doing it? Aside from being paid to do it, and aside from the promise of promotion or whatever it is, what is it that actually drives you to enjoy what you're doing? And one of them is enjoyment in itself. If you enjoy doing something, you will do more of it because you get enjoyment from doing it. You feel fulfilled from doing it. So it's important that you pick things and projects and things that you can work on that allow you to get that enjoyment. Inevitably, there's always something that crops up that you really don't want to do, but you have to. It's part and parcel sometimes of the job. But focus the majority of your efforts onto things that you enjoy doing, and get involved in the things that you want to do. Have purpose. That's another thing, another motivator. If you have purpose in what you're doing, you end up feeling more fulfilled in the work that you're doing. There's some studies, a lot of studies around millennials and what motivates them, and they're saying it's not just ambition now, it's purpose. They want purpose in a role. You want purpose in the job that you do, and know that you're doing it for a greater cause as well. Growth. Do you get growth out of doing it? Is there personal development in there for you doing it? Is that why you want to do it? So you want to learn more, you want to actually expand your skill set and your knowledge and everything with it as well? Or do you have curiosity? Is that your motivator? You want to find out more, you want to explore it and get to know more about it? And is there passion in what you do as well? So is that your motivator? It's a passion for it. And we typically see that with things like hobbies, which are normally unpaid, and you do them because you have a passion for doing it. You really enjoy doing it. Self-expression as well is a big one. Is it a form of expression for you that helps you as well and helps you as a person? Or is it mastery? You want to be the best in what you do and be a subject matter expert, and you enjoy that's what motivates you to do it. So it's important that we recognize both of those, and we're going to ask our panel in a moment a few more questions on that and what their motivators are. But I think it's really important to kind of be aware of what motivates you, and like I say, channel your energies and your time into things that you get those motivations from. And if you don't, then talk to your manager and work out, right, these are the things that I'm really good at, and these are the things that motivate me to do well in my job, and have that conversation with them so they're aware as well. Good. Okay, so that's the end of my piece. It's a bit of an introduction to the topic and what we're going to talk about today, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and head over into the panel discussion. So I want to open it up first of all by talking about motivators and self-awareness. And I'm going to ask you, Parmi, if you can start us off. What motivates you as a person? And also, have you always been aware of your motivators, or is it something that someone pointed out to you or you figured out over time?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I have to be honest with you. I don't think I initially ever did know what motivated me. I think for a long time, I just carried on and something kind of worked, or I would like navel gaze at failure for quite a while and then try and have to pick myself up at some stage. And actually it was a conversation I had with you, Sheila, last week that triggered a story that I remember. I was having dinner with friends a long time ago when that was normal to do. And we were all sitting there, and work came up because it was dinner after work, and everybody at that table complained about what they did. None of them were really that happy. And I was at the table, I was the only person that really didn't have a complaint. I really enjoyed what I do and what I did. And I think a lot of those intrinsic motivators is a big list of the things that motivate me. And it was actually probably at that dinner table and the conversation we had, that a number of things motivate me. It's not only that I really enjoy what I do, but over time and working in leadership roles, what I've learned is I actually really enjoy other people doing well, and I will do everything I possibly can to get those guys to achieve what they would like. And even if it's not to do with my role and it's something they want to do or they want to grow in their role, I'll help if I can. And that is a big motivator for me, to do a good job, to enjoy what I do, which naturally I become passionate about it because I like it. I become curious because I want to master it. So all those things kind of blend in and link. And over time, I think you realize and start to pinpoint, if those things motivate you, they become your drivers. And then that makes you productive. So they all kind of link with each other. So I would say, no, I didn't initially know what my motivators were. And over time and through, I guess, on seeing other people and hearing other people not be so happy, I kind of realized actually I do enjoy what I do, and I have a passion for it, and I want to master it, and I'm curious about learning, and I don't get tired of learning. So I would say that a lot of those intrinsic list is my motivators.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, so same question to you, Sim. So again, what are your motivators? Are you aware of them, and have you always been aware of them?
So definitely have not always been aware of them. So I kind of started my career off back in Lloyds Bank. So I kind of left uni, went onto their grad scheme, and you kind of get flung around different departments, right from doing a risk audit to being in front of a customer, serving them over a till. And I kind of did that, and then I kind of figured out where in the bank I wanted to be. There was lots of opportunity. Ended up in their technology department, and I stayed kind of with the bank for around about 5 years. And it was only towards the end of that I started to look and think about, what is it that I like about this company? And it wasn't really the company, it was more the type of work that I was doing. So I enjoy working with tech. I really enjoyed working with people. And I kind of, when I reflected, I found that I really enjoyed certain projects more than others when it was really fast paced. And so that made me think about my next move. And that's kind of when I made the leap over to a really small kind of startup that was really aggressive. And I was able to just kind of roll my sleeves up and get really stuck in. And that's when I really started to think about my motivators even more. And I think what I've become quite aware now of myself is I love working with people. So any role where you're talking to all different types of people, it's not just a very insular role, you know, you're having to kind of have meetings with lots of different stakeholders, and also then one that has a real purpose. So kind of what I love about being in product is you're kind of fact finding, you're getting loads of data, you're speaking to a load of customers to identify their pain points, and then you translate all of that into actual something that's going to have a benefit for the end user, and you kind of can see that right, you know, end to end, and you're responsible for that happening. And when you can kind of see the feedback from a user, whether they like it or they hate it, that's what kind of really, I guess, ticks my box. I know I can do something about it. So yeah, it took a bit of time to figure out what they were, but I think now I'm fairly comfortable around what they are, and I make sure that any role that I have kind of will enable me to remain motivated, and then I guess stay productive on the back of it.
Yeah, I think you make a really excellent point as well about choosing the right role, and that becomes a real point to really reflect and say, actually, am I getting the motivations that I need in my role? And if not, do I need to look for my next role, or is there a way that I can get this? And then, like you said, that kind of brought that awareness as well. So what is it I actually like about it? Like, you have to, I think, in order for you to be productive and to be successful, you have to love what you do, and you have to figure those motivations out. Thanks, Sim. Thanks for sharing that. Kerry, same question to you then. What's your motivators? And again, have you always been aware of them or not?
Yeah, so thanks, Sheila. I mean, similarly to Sim and Palmy there, I've got, you know, a wide range of different motivators and things that have motivated me over the time. I mean, previous to the job that I'm in now, I was in sales, so it was almost an extrinsic motivator there. You know, you're striving for your own glory and for your own kind of achievement of those material things, to be the best and to be the first and whatnot. And then as time went on and I moved into more of an L&D role, still within the same company, but training and developing the people in the role that I was in, all of a sudden that sense of achievement that I felt for other people, and to see other people up on that stage where I was, that completely, you know, blew that previous feeling out of the water. So my motivators have definitely moved and kind of, you know, changed over time, and now I'm much more motivated by seeing other people achieve and other people thrive and grow and develop as people themselves. And I find as well, my motivators can kind of be siloed into work life and personal life as well. I mean, you know, a massive change for me. 3 years ago, I had my little girl, Paisley, and then all of a sudden, those things that were a priority to me no longer were. It was all about her, and it wasn't necessarily what I was doing or achieving or feeling for myself, but it was what impact that had to her, and to, you know, to the other people around me. So yes, I know what my motivators are. No, I didn't always know what they were, and I think for me as well, that reflection piece is key. It wasn't something that I just sort of stumbled upon one day and had that kind of light bulb moment. It was a case of stopping and pausing and looking back and looking critically back as well, and not necessarily on what I achieved, but how I felt from achieving it, and what impact that then had on the next challenge or the next project or the next thing that was on the pathway for me.
Good. Yeah, you make a really great point there around the fact that motivators aren't the same the whole way through. They change. We have different priorities in life. We have different things we need to be conscious of. So it's important that we're constantly reflecting, like you said, and we're self-aware and we're critical as well. So that kind of leads me on to my next question. So I'll stick with you, Kerry, on this one. So looking at the self-awareness, it's a really hard thing for people to be able to do and actually understand and be critical of yourself as well, and not necessarily in a negative way, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but looking at your own strengths and your own weaknesses. So how do you kind of do that for people that perhaps struggle with kind of identifying what their triggers are, what the strengths and weaknesses are? How have you approached that in the past, Kerry? What questions do you ask yourself? How do you kind of assess that?
That's a really difficult question, actually. I think for me, it's more about having a clear focus on the end goal. And, you know, like I said earlier, the end goal isn't necessarily a thing or a place. It's a feeling. And then kind of pausing and asking myself various questions along the way of okay, how am I doing in progress to getting there? But how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling about that, about the position that I'm in? Because, you know, it doesn't always happen overnight. It could be a couple of years down the line, your journey of getting there. And, you know, those couple of years, if you're not in a good place whilst you're on your journey, it might be that the end goal needs to pivot and needs to change, because if you're not enjoying the journey, who knows if you're going to enjoy the destination. So I think for me that it's about being honest with yourself. It's about asking yourself those questions, and being critical with asking yourself how you're feeling along the way.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, so Palmy, just moving over to you. So you're currently on furlough, and so is Kerry as well. So we'll come back to Kerry in a moment on this. But obviously, you're not doing your typical working week where you'd be constantly doing all the productive tasks that you do in your role. So how are you keeping yourself productive and kind of with that, keeping yourself motivated and productive while you're on furlough?
Yeah, sure. So wasn't easy initially, I have to say. I think anyone who was put on furlough, I mean, it depends on the kind of mindset that you kind of look at it. And I think there was kind of two ways it could have gone. And we were super busy, especially within the marketing team. Like, it was full on. We were like working crazy. So it was really, really kind of hard to all of a sudden just stop and kind of just take a step back and go, okay, I literally don't have much else to do now. And I could have kind of just gone into this negative pit of, oh, like, now I haven't got anything, and I, like, you know, work gave me purpose and all of this stuff. And it's like negative self-talk that you kind of have to just, you know, work on overcoming, because otherwise you start to focus on your failures and you start to navel gaze and procrastinate and do all these things, and actually then you're not being productive at all. The only thing you're being productive on is navel gazing and being procrastinating on everything. So the other bucket was, okay, I've been told to stop, and anyone who knows me knows that's not an easy thing for me to do. So what do I do with this time? And I really took a moment to, I guess, evaluate and embrace the stop. Because by embracing the stop, I was able to see that actually I've gained a shed load of time. And time for me is a massive, massive thing. I value it greatly. It's probably more valuable than I would say a lot of things to me. I love having time to spend with my family, time to spend with people I love, time to talk, time to do and learn the things I enjoy. So how I looked at it was, okay, what do I do with this time? Effectively, I got told, here's a you know, a ticket, go where you want, but don't go outside or wear a mask or whatever, you know, COVID-19, whatever. So, okay, what do I do? So I just kind of looked at this and said, what's the best use of my time? What can I do? And like, there's like loads of errands around the house. Yeah, great. I could do that, write a list, I'll do all those things. But then I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to come back potentially and hit the ground running. And I'm not really in tune with kind of the day-to-day of the changes of what's happening within the business. So I need to think about how I can add value with this time. And a lot of what I did, probably thanks to you, Sheila, as well, was really start to abuse the LinkedIn learning. And I say abuse because I think I abused it a bit too much and then had to take a break. And I just was like, okay, what are the things that I haven't really done within my role that I would like to do? What are the things I think that I would like to learn more about? You know, a lot of the coaches kind of, you know, have these great presentations, really motivating. And like, how do I get into that kind of, be able to present better? How do I you know, get more skill set in a marketing role? And same thing with, like, you know, Sim working within product, like, okay, what can I learn that could maybe contribute to kind of looking at the value of what benefits do, and just really trying to link what I enjoy and what I'm missing in this kind of space, and utilize it in a way that still adds value, still drives me, still kind of motivates me, keeps me productive at the same time, but also I'm ready, you know, when the time comes to jump right back in. So LinkedIn learning was a big one. Reading, there was quite a few books that I didn't get to read when I was on holiday, or I couldn't read because the journey was not as long on the tube, or etc. So I got through quite a few books, and I just really needed to, I guess, like I said, embrace the stop to evaluate and be self-aware of how much I didn't stop, and of how much time I probably didn't utilize, because I was so busy trying to be productive and so busy trying to just get the job done and get the stuff out. And I actually have to say I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to have been furloughed, because a lot of the self-awareness I had was also so many of my team members who are still working, even though it might be a little bit quiet, are working twice as hard to, you know, support what we are going to have to kind of contribute on the way back. So it was still linking to those motivators of kind of, how do I help others do better when I'm back eventually? Yeah, taking the time to, as Kerry said, to really be self-aware, because I know I cannot stop. I know that I love doing things and keeping busy, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes you are put in a position where you have to, and the best thing I could say is take the time, embrace the stop.
I think that's a really positive message, actually, Parmi, and I think it's what you say there around actually thinking future-wise as well, that you're coming back as well, and what can you do to prepare yourself for that is something that we don't necessarily think about straight away. We always focus on the now, don't we, and on what's happening now, and actually we should be looking to what do I need for the future? What do I need to be even better when I come back as well, and how can I work on that? Okay, so Sim, just going over to you then. Obviously, you're in the opposite camp. You are still working, and you're that person that Palmer's saying is everyone's doing twice as much work now because we're in leaner teams and things, and obviously you've got a big task leading your unit to deliver on the super pay stuff. So how are you making sure the work that you're doing is meaningful work, and that it's adding the value, and you're assigning yourself to the right priorities?
Yes, this is an interesting one, actually, because if I think about kind of pre-COVID, we were making kind of awesome effort and progress on SuperPay. Like we had 10 customers on the pilot. We were learning lots from them, and then obviously COVID came along, and a lot of our priorities had to change pretty much, within 24, 48 hours. And there were things like bite back that were being spun up, and business funding. And so our time and focus quickly kind of switched to those. And it did take, a bit of time to kind of make sense of it all, both from a professional level and personally, kind of what's going on. And the way that I found I could get kind of meaning out of what I was doing was kind of putting myself into the wider picture. So really starting to understand, if I move to go to support the bite back product, for instance, why is that? What happens if my role isn't here? And it was kind of, that was really motivating for me, because it was kind of like, okay, this is my time to kind of really help on this focus for this customer need that's currently, come into play on the back of the coronavirus. And then when we switch back and actually, we're all kind of 100% back on SuperPay now, again, just putting myself into that kind of wider picture around what's my role really here for, what's the benefit of what I do on the businesses that we support. That kind of really helps me day to day. And I think I'm quite lucky in product, because I've actually got, I kind of live and breathe the customer feedback is central to kind of the role and the unit. So you get to see, day in, day out, actually what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think without that, I'd really struggle to get the kind of meaningfulness out of the role. So yeah, that's kind of some of the stuff that I do, is kind of fitting myself into that wider picture.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think being able to see, like you said, the outputs, again, in itself, it's a motivator for you. It allows you to kind of keep pushing forward, doesn't it, and ensure that you're doing the right stuff and how it's being taken. Good. Okay, so Kerry, part of your role is obviously you're a coach. You work on personal development. You help people to actually identify their own strengths and weaknesses, and this kind of personal growth and how to improve. So is there any kind of special formula to how you kind of help people start to recognize and help to become more self-aware, more productive, like set the right goals? Like, is there anything you can kind of advise people listening as to how they can start to achieve more, basically?
I mean, there's not a special formula as such. I mean, everybody's an individual, so by having a one-size-fits-all approach, it wouldn't be very productive. I mean, you're right in as far as, my role very much does depend on people sharing their motivators and being aware of them and what they are and what it is that they want to achieve from that. And then, together we put a plan in place as to how they can get there. And sure, I can be super perceptive and read between the lines and sort of, use my own skills to work out what they are. But me knowing it isn't particularly important. It's them knowing it that's the most important piece. So I find that people aren't often in the business of sharing what those motivators are, because it's a very personal thing. And I think, quite often, maybe you're not aware of it, maybe people aren't aware of it, or they're not often in the situation where they vocalize it or they put it into words. So that task in itself can be quite tricky. So I find that actually relationship between myself and the person I'm coaching is really key to put them into a situation and a position where they feel comfortable sharing those really personal feelings and really personal things. So for me, it's just about breaking it down. And sure, there are questions that you can use to unpick that, such as what or who inspires you, or what kind of things are you proud of, what accomplishments are you super proud of, and how long did it take you to get there, and tell me about that journey. And you start to kind of plant little seeds and start the sparks for those light bulbs, and then you just watch that unravel as they get there themselves and they start to pull on that string.
Great, thank you. I think you're right there. It's not a one size fits all. I think we have to be conscious of that not everyone fits into the same mold. I think it'd be super useful, and I don't know how everyone feels about this, but Kerry, if there are any of those kind of questions that people could ask themselves, just a few, just to guide people to start thinking that way, I think it'd be really lovely if we could share that after this, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I can put a little PDF together for you guys to share.
Thank you. That'd be really kind. Thank you. Okay, good. So, Palmy, going back over to you. Obviously, your role, we've got Sim, who obviously leads the unit. We've got Kerry, who works on a coaching piece. You work as someone who provides services to field sellers and to partners. And you have to make sure it's stuff that kind of drives them to, it's very sales driven. Obviously, you've got to kind of equip them with tools and knowledge and things that they need in order to do their job well. So how do you kind of start to understand their needs and what works for them, and how do you kind of ensure that it helps drive their business, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a hard question, because it's not just one thing, and it's a number of things, including experience and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. A lot of people don't know this about me, but for a long time I actually worked in Harrods, and working in Harrods wasn't easy. It was great, and it wasn't as glamorous as people think, but it taught me some really hard truths about selling, and a lot of things about value and the benefits and things like that. And I worked in fashion for a bit, and then I worked in homewares, which is like super boring, but actually like very interesting. And the thing that taught me was about being personable, but the sales aspect of it it's really hard, and it doesn't matter who it is, to get people to part with their money. Now, there's an element of shift between kind of the payment sense sales guys and what I was doing, because the payment sense sales guys, they go in to a merchant store, and it's kind of like uninvited, and you're not quite sure, and that merchant's probably seen about 6 of these guys already. So they're already kind of on the back foot, right? And Kerry will know this, and you, Sheila and Sim, probably you guys will know this. And when people come into Harrods, they're on the front foot because they've obviously come in for something. And if you shift that, it's still making people part with their money. And that's the fundamentals. It's this, some people come in and they don't want anything. They just want to have a look around and say, hey, been Harrods, right? And those sales kind of methodologies and those teachings have really stuck with me. And when I sat on the training for Payment Sense, I was like, oh, wow, this is super hard. Like, how the things that you equip a seller with. And a lot of these guys are not sales guys. They don't have much experience. They've come from like a finance background, or they've owned their own business previously or something. It's a very eclectic portfolio of people. And to try and train those guys up, which you guys do an incredible job doing, to get them to go in, and the guts it takes to go in and be maybe the 4th person to come in and try and sell someone something when they're already very busy, is a massive admiration I have for them. So one of the major things that was a priority for me was talking and stalking, and like literally stalking, because I will ask questions, and they will sometimes be the stupidest questions. But if I don't ask them, I cannot understand the fundamentals of what they need. And sometimes I'm not out on the ground, and when I first started, I used to go into the shops and try and sell payment sets. I was rubbish at it, I'm not going to lie. And sometimes I was really good at it. Like I was able to go, oh, actually I can understand. But it was really interesting to take, from Sim's point, kind of what he does is he really has to add value and give the benefits of whatever we provide. So that works for partners and for sellers. So talking and stalking, trying to get those guys. I'm on like WhatsApp groups, and those guys are very, very vocal. And the thing about a seller and partners and the PMs are they're all really vocal, which is a beautiful thing. I think to be able to open dialogue, which may not have existed before, and it's two-way, for me to go over to somebody and say, hey, I think we should do this. And they go, oh, we'll try it and we'll see how it goes. And then it works. And we're like, right, great. I've got their buy-in. That's a foot in the door. And now it's two-way, and they can say to me, have you tried this? A great example of kind of getting enablement and working from this side of is the kind of surveys that John does. But we did a big survey right at the beginning, quite early on, to the field sellers, and basically asked them, what do you want when you give a leaflet? What are you saying? What are you selling? What other pain points the customers are highlighting? And to our surprise, a lot of sellers were like, we need everything on a leaflet, one leaflet, just tell them everything. And then you find that actually you do that and the customer has no idea what you're doing, no idea what you're selling, and ends up using that like as a tea coaster, or folds it up and wedges it for the door, right? So by doing that survey, we were able to really get an insight and then hone in and create separate messages for different, benefits, and adding different elements of value to the business. And the sales guys are really taking a consultative approach. So I had to take a consultative approach. I had to really understand from the seller's point of view, kind of what are the challenges that you're having, and are those challenges that I can change, A, and B, are those challenges going to move the needle for you guys as a seller? And the same approach is for the PMs and partners. The beauty about the PMs is they are fabulous at what they do and honing in the relationship for the partner. Partners will tell them stuff that partner would never tell us on a survey. They'll be having a conversation about something, and something would be said in a meeting, and you'd never get that nugget from a survey. And that channel and bridge of communication, and I guess marketing is a bridge, right? What it does, or you could say it's a conductor. It takes all the elements of different businesses and it leads it down to one tune. And I guess in a way I take that approach. I want to take every element of every aspect of the channel. I want to speak to everybody who touches that customer. Provisioning, learning and development, the coaches, sellers, sales support, the PMs, right? The partners, speak to them directly. I want to know everything, because from a holistic perspective, we're selling the same product, but we're just doing it slightly differently. So a big factor is communication. Another big factor is collaboration. And a third one is ask questions. Ask. There's never a stupid question. And even if it is, you're not stupid for asking it, right? So it's a culmination of things to be able to provide the tools that the guys require from a sales perspective and from a partner perspective. It's massive collaboration, a massive amount of communication.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I think it's super important, isn't it, to understand your customers' needs. And by customers, we don't necessarily mean a paying customer, but is it a stakeholder in the business? Is it a group of people? Is it a department? Like, who is it that you're doing this stuff for, you're providing your time for, and then work out from there what's important and how do you kind of prioritize and make sure you're assigning value to the right parts. Okay, cool, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so as we're starting to come to the end of the session, I just want to finish off with two more questions, and if there's any questions from you guys as well as you're listening, just pop them in the chat box and we'll get those answered at the end. But Sim, just going over to you, so we've talked about kind of how to identify what are the things to work on, how to add value, how to be self-aware, how to be motivated. But with that comes a lot of pressure as well, especially now. And again, like we said, you're still working, you're kind of driving a remote team to deliver on a huge project for the business, the biggest probably that we've ever done. How do you kind of deal with staying positive, I suppose, and working well under pressure and not getting to the point where you're burning out? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges with this is just recognizing the pressure. So day to day, you kind of, you've got loads of meetings, you're kind of, working through your to-do list, etc. And, you could start off really, really positive on a Monday and you don't feel that pressured. And by Friday, you've had kind of the worst week and you've been up and down. And I think what's really important to try and do is recognize that pressure. And sometimes the pressure is quite healthy and you're enjoying it and it's actually energizing you even more. And you're kind of really into your groove of kind of what you're trying to deliver. And then on the other hand, you've got kind of the negative pressure, which is actually impacting your, the way you think, the way you focus, the way you're feeling in terms of, whether you're feeling burnt out or, a little bit down. One of the things I actually, so I find it quite hard to do kind of meditation and mindfulness, but I tried Headspace last year. Actually, it came as a package with Spotify. And I was trying a lot of the courses and I couldn't really get into it. I was finding my mind was just being distracted elsewhere. But one of the things I did take away from it, which almost made the £5 a month kind of completely worth it, was it trains you to just recognize when your thoughts are somewhere. So, even if you're not going to do anything with those thoughts, but just recognize, what you're feeling. And so that's a tiny bit of advice I took from using Headspace, which is to recognize, if I am feeling pressured and I'm starting to panic before a meeting because there's so much to do and I'm worried about, that I'm not going to hit, the delivery dates and be able to meet kind of customers' needs, etc., is to just recognize that that's kind of sitting there and like somewhere in my mind. And if it gets to a point where, I'm starting to notice it even more, is to do something about it. So then just, stand back, shut my laptop, go for a walk, and just kind of manage it that way, as opposed to kind of just trying to, I guess, really say, I'm really under pressure now, I don't know what to do, and kind of freak yourself out. And so, yeah, that's been really helping me recently, just to kind of notice it's there. And also notice when it's like negative pressure versus healthy pressure. Sometimes I kind of know, actually, yeah, I'm really enjoying this. It's difficult to maneuver, but I'm kind of I'm getting a little bit of a kick out of around, let's say, on the 1st of June, what we want to deliver. It's actually at times quite fun because it means you've got a real goal to work towards.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It comes down to that self-awareness, isn't it? It's not just recognizing your strengths and motivators. It's recognizing when it's too much, what those pressures are. So thank you. Okay, so we're just going to wrap up the session. There hasn't been any questions coming through, so if there are any, just pop them in there for us. But just leaving thoughts and leaving notes really from all of you guys. If you had to give one piece of advice to those people listening around everything we've discussed today, what would be your kind of one piece of advice you'd give? So Kerry, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, and coincidentally, actually, one of the things that I've been studying, I've been doing a lot of online studying whilst I've been off on furlough, and one of the subjects is the psychological state of flow. So we've all been there where, you're just on fire and everything that you put your hand to is working and you're super productive, and all of those distractions that are going on around you just don't exist to you, and you're really focused. And actually I learned that the mind can only focus all of its resources for a maximum of 45 minutes to an hour. So again, reflecting back on me when I'm super productive is when I'm breaking things down into bite-sized chunks and working on a project for 45 minutes and then going out and having a bit of fresh air or getting a cup of tea or having a little walk around the living room, and then picking something up or picking the same thing back up again, and just breaking it down so that you're giving your mind and your body a chance to breathe and rest and kind of refuel before you call on it for its full attention again. So my advice would be to mix that into your scheduling, whether that is a list or whether you're using Google Calendar or whatever else you're using for that, but focus it.
Great, thank you. Okay, Palmy, over to you.
My bit of advice would be what I mentioned before, which was embrace the stop. Take the opportunity just to take a step back. Exactly like Sim said and Kerry said, just, you know, if you have to walk away, take a break, go for a walk, but really embrace that time to just stop, get your thoughts together, reevaluate, ask yourself the questions you need to ask, and then get back to kind of what you're doing.
Brilliant, thank you. And echoing what Vanessa's put on there, it's embrace the stop. And Sim, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just don't forget that you're always learning. You don't have to have, you know, time blocked out in the diary to learn. A lot of the time, if you're self-aware, you know, just reflect after a meeting and be like, actually, yeah, I learned something new in that, or that bit was interesting, I want to learn more. And I think that can really help with like motivation and especially productivity, because even if you didn't get that task that you wanted to do today, you still developed yourself. You still learned so much throughout that day that you didn't know before. And I think that I find that quite motivating as well sometimes, just to look at, I keep a Trello column of just shit I've learned, I've called it, but basically, you know, just things that I didn't know before that week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way of doing it. You're probably really amazed when you look back at that list as well, and you've seen it written down, like you're learning all the time. Good, okay, thank you. So the final bit then I just want to show you guys is just a few resources on what we've talked about today. So there's a couple of books. If you're a reader, there's one called Drive by Dan Pink, which talks about what motivates us and motivations of people. There's also some great stuff. It's an old classic, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. He talks about how to create the right habits, but he also talks a lot around time management and productivity as well. LinkedIn Learning, always plugging it. There's some really great courses on there. This is just one of them, but it's Morning Habits of High Performers. There's loads on there, loads of different content that you can see. And then final one as well, if you're a visual person, you like videos, there's some great TED Talks. But again, Dan Pink, who wrote the book Drive, he does a talk on the puzzle of motivation as well. Special thank you today to Parmi, Sim and Kerry for joining us and sharing your insights. It's been really useful, some things that I've taken away that I think I'll start introducing as well. Guys, next one is next week at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, and it's on collaboration, so how to keep a team in culture. So I hope you can join us then. Thanks everyone, take care.